Okay, so I'm continuing with games from ICC's Team 45-45 League. And, second. Okay. Now, okay, this is the Tarrasch variation against the French defense. The idea is that White wants to avoid a pin. Okay, so it's not a bad choice. A lot of variations, Black will accept an isolated queen pawn. Let's see what happens. No, I'm sorry. I'm dyslexic. White will accept an isolated queen pawn. But here, Black transposes into, I call it the Mises variation. It may also be called the Bern variation. And it's often reached, let me show you. It's often reached with this move order. Now, back in 1972, when I was first playing rated tournaments, I was buying a lot of chess books, and one of the books I picked up was Tarrasch's Best Games. Siebert Tarrasch was, one of the better players in the world. Certainly, definitely in the top 5. Lasker was ahead of him. He was equal to Chigorin. They pretty close. They drew a match. Steinitz was stronger than Tarrasch. So, you definitely got 2 better than him and 1 who arguably better, Chigorin. And, then there comes Tarrasch. Lasker really had Tarrasch's number. But anyway, I think it was around World War I, Tarrasch played a match with this fellow other German master named Mises, M-I-E-S-E-S. And in the discussion of the games, Mises would make this capture, and both men had an opinion of the position. Tarrasch thought that the move was a mistake because it surrendered the center, and Mises thought it was a great move because it gave room for his pieces. Now, they're both right. So, but the author said, Fred Reinfeldt said, this essentially said this differing opinion will lead to some creative and instructive chess. Okay, as both sides try to impose their will on the other. Now, the games that were published in Tarrasch's books, those were wins. It's his best games. You can find the whole match if you Google for it. It's online. And I know in some cases Tarrasch won some very, very quick victories. I don't remember the score of the match, but it isn't a bad line. A matter of fact, people who are struggling with the French defense, when they just can't get this French bishop going, we call it a French bishop because it's blocked in behind pawns. Well, it's not blocked in behind pawns anymore. Since Black has traded off this D pawn, it's going to end up fianchettoing and have a very decent diagonal. So let's play a few moves and see what happens. Now, I don't think this should come out right away. It's playable. Let me give you an example of what might happen. Okay, maybe this knight goes here, and White can set a trap. See, Black can't take this pawn because he loses his queen. Okay. Now maybe Black plays here, and White does this, and Black castles. Now here I want to show you a little trap, just so you don't fall into it, or maybe you can get somebody in it. B6 is now a mistake because knight takes knight check, bishop takes, and then the queen goes to E4, and White has a double attack. There's a threat of checkmate, and then there's a threat on the Black rook. So clearly what Black has to do is delay B6 a move in this particular position, and wait, Black's move. Play here. Now, say White castles and B6, well, it doesn't work anymore. Because the moment you go here, not only you're not threatening mate, you lose your queen. Okay, so Anyway, that's just like some of the idea. Oh, I wanted to show more. I apologize. I hit the button too quick. Okay, so white castles. Now, one of black's ideas is to, like I say, is to play for one of these breaks, and he can probably play c5 here. Okay, so now takes, and this game is essentially even, and black's bishops are good. Whoops, go this way. So here, I would say Mises is right in this variation. This opening has given freedom to his pieces, and what does white really control in the center? He doesn't even have a center pawn anymore. So white does have the 3-on-2 pawn majority. So what does this mean? It means, theoretically, in an endgame, white can create an outside pass pawn. Now, when I was learning chess in the 60s, reading a lot of chess books, I found one author was talking about how great this 3-on-2 pawn majority is, and he was giving an example, and he showed it like a snapshot, different diagrams from a certain game, and where I think black had the 3-on-2, and then all of a sudden he skipped way ahead, and the 3-on-2 had become a 1-0, and then black had an easy win. That pawn was just causing too much trouble. So I think I was a little disappointed that the author didn't show and explain how we got down to that 3-on-2 majority. Well, if you want to know, what you do is you're basically, white might advance this a pawn up here, trade it, and then he brings his pawns up here and pushes there, and then he gets 3-to-1. I'm sorry, his 3-to-2 becomes a 1-0 pawn majority. Okay, so this author was just raving about how great it is. Now, there's a book written on the endgame. It's called Endgame Strategy. It's inexpensive. It's by an author named Sherezhevsky. And if you know how Sammy Reshevsky spells his last name, you almost got this author. He just has the prefix SHE in front. So a Soviet writer, and this is probably the best endgame book I've ever seen. It's advanced, but it's advanced enough to where your casual club player can understand what it's doing. And like his chapter on 2 bishops versus a bishop and knight is just outstanding. And then he does have a chapter on the 3-on-2 pawn majority, and it isn't all that it's cracked up to be. And you'd have to read his book to see it. So if you're feeling weak in the end games and want some good explanations, that is a great book to read. Endgame Strategy by Sherezhevsky. Okay, so this is just an idea. I mean, it's none of these lines are forced. But if you're a French defense player and having trouble with the opening, or it's worth investigation. Okay, so let's go back to the continuation. So he plays bishop here, and now you see he's activating it right away with a threat. So the drawback with the strategy for black is he is blocking it. Oops, I can't draw an arrow straight today. He is blocking the c pawn with his bishop. Black would like to advance that c pawn in a lot of lines. Okay, and he did take 2 moves to get to c6, and if you go to b7, well, that you can say, well, that takes 2 moves too. Well, yes, it does, but the case in point is now the pawn on b6 supports the c5 break, and the bishop on c6 is not blocking this pawn. So it's an adequate move. It's not his best. We should be thinking, we being black should be thinking about getting castled. Okay, so it develops and protects. And here we see a system somewhat similar to what I had shown. The difference being the placement of this bishop. Okay, now white's just developing. And then what often happens in this line, we see some exchanges here. So these exchanges tend to keep the position even. Now white needs to take the knight, And, just like that, black is very close to, if he doesn't already have full equality. White's lead development is really not there. Okay, white needs to develop a queen and a rook. Black needs to castle and bring both rooks to the center. So black can castle right now. Let's see if he does. Well, he doesn't. He gains the tempo. But we'll come back. But I want to discuss here, if you're playing for a win, and we all like to win, right? If you're playing for a win, allowing this many 3 minor pieces to be exchanged in consecutive moves really isn't a good idea, because you're not left with too much to fight with after that. Now, I'm not saying white can't win. I'm not saying that at all. But for the moment, the position is even. Both sides have 0 weaknesses in their position. So we can logically say this game is even. So what could white have done differently? Let's back it up. Well, one way to keep pieces on the board is to stop and just play knight g3. Okay, now, if black really wants to make some exchanges, he can. I mean, he can take this knight, which in a way is kind of silly because it's developing white's queen, right? It's putting this pawn in jeopardy. It's giving up the bishop pair without a fight. This bishop would have moved 3 times to capture a knight that moved only once. So, my own personal thing I often do is, regarding exchanges, when I avoid them, I have this logic. The logic is, I think, and it's a confident logic, and I want you to develop this too. I think I can do I think I can do more with my minor pieces than you can do with yours. Now, if I'm playing a low-rated player, this is generally the case. If I'm playing a higher-rated player, well, guess what? He's going to prove to me why his pieces are better. He can do more with his. Okay, it's all relative. There's always a bigger fish until you become Magnus Carlsen. So we're not there. We're not close. We're just working on improving our game from where we're at and taking those gains as they are. So this is a way to avoid an exchange, just knight g3, and then they play chess. Okay, so we'll skip forward. So if you have this position with white, and you're underrated by 150 points, you've got to be very, very happy. Okay. It chases the rook. Knight puts it on e2. The logic here is, I guess he wants to develop his queen and maybe double rooks on the e file. Okay. Perfectly logical idea. Let's see. Now, it might fall victim to a tempo by the knight, depending on how black plays this. Now, I don't think black should have castled long here, but and the reason I say is this: it's normal to castle this way. The same side as your opponent. You're castling, when you're castling queenside, you're basically inviting a pawn storm. So there is a certain amount of logic of doing this. Castling kingside would keep the game very equal, and black needs to play for a win. Okay, why? Because he's the higher rated player. Okay, if you're a higher rated player, you don't want to, unless you absolutely have to, you don't want to give up a draw to a low rated player. But the point is that castling queenside is sometimes not as safe as castling kingside. And, the objective is now both sides are going to run some kind of a pawn storm, okay, and play for a mate, okay, right? But once again, black doesn't have a whole lot of stuff to mate with. For that matter, neither does white, but I see it less likely that black is going to be able to generate an effective attack with this. And I think this king will be in a little more danger than this king. But, the game is still even. So here, reinforces this, opens up a diagonal, and prepares for the pawn storm. Okay, now here I'm talking about coming into this square. Let's see what white does. So he does this. Now there's an attack. Now, how do you defend this? With a6 or with king b8? The problem with a6 is you don't want to move the pawns in front of your king. This allows white to advance up to to b5, and a file is going to open up. Okay, so black should play king b8 here. Okay, but you know, it's one of the problems with castling queenside. You stop short of defending your a pawn, and often we do have to tuck the king over there to protect it. Okay, now this takes away the rooks from the king side assault, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so here comes black's pawn storm, and now he elects to take that, to chase that. Now this is double-edged. It's also, I think it's wrong. Black is just trying to mix things up. Let's see what happens. Okay, now what's interesting is this capture. Okay, now he needs to take here. Now, let's see. One interesting move is to, well, I want to be able to take down here, but we can't at the moment because this is hanging. Let me see. This is an extremely interesting move. Okay, the point being, we're banking on this pawn being pinned defensively. So, for instance, black cannot take this because white will capture the rook and be a rook ahead. Okay. Now, the other idea behind this move is that, you know, we say, well, black is just crushing. He, you know, after king takes, you know, black is very close to getting a checkmate. Well, that may be true if white takes, but the strategy here is that white wants to pretend or treat that pawn on g2 as if it was one of his own. He's going to use it as a shield. Okay? Now, white won't take that pawn until the ending when it's safe. Right now, it's just going to sit there. So here white has this move available. And, you know, white's getting some pressure here, no matter how you slice it. Okay, if pawn takes, you know, we're chasing the queen. Now, you know, now these two squares are vulnerable, and you know, the pawns aren't connected anymore. But it's going to take black a while to negotiate two pieces to be able to attack them. Let's see, queen here. You know, white to play. You know, white could almost just play this move right now, and this creates some threats. Let's see. Let's burn a move. Okay, we're going to take here, and now comes check. And the only way black can avoid mate is to give up his queen with the X-ray defense. And now check. Black has survived the mate, but he's behind a queen for a rook. So now that doesn't mean black's going to lose this. I'm just saying this is what white is threatening by wait, what was this? What was the last move here? What was I doing? Was I putting this here? Let's back it up. Sometimes my short-term memory goes. Ask me something 45 years ago, I'll tell you about it as if I was there. Ask me something 2 minutes ago, I give up. Okay. Let's see. Well, maybe it was this move. Yeah, because I was doing this, right? Okay, now I remember. I was trying to decide, was I going to the 7th? And, you know, this creates a threat. So, you know, the threat is rook takes, followed by rook check. So, you know, what's black going to do? We don't know. Let's make a little error, okay? Well, you know, white suddenly has some new and entertaining moves on the plate. Okay, the pawn is pinned. You know, black can take. Check. Check. But white's not any worse for wear here. It's even material. So anyway, I'm not sure if this move quite cut the mustard. Okay, so he decides to go here. Now that keeps the threat on this. So rather than attack, maybe black should have attacked, gone with knight f4. But he chooses to play defense here. And sometimes that's what can be your downfall, when you stop and play defense when you should be playing offense. But white comes back. Here come the pawns. And, black has started his attack, but he still doesn't have it going full throttle yet. Meanwhile, white's getting his pawns rolling, so we're on the way. Now, I give black a lot of credit. He is taking his time. White's going probably a little too fast. He should have about 10-12 minutes less on his clock. And white's just picking up space on the queen side, and black has just abandoned his attempt to attack on the king side. So this can often be fatal. Because I was saying, when you stop attacking and start defending, that's what you're doing. You're defending. Now we see the knight return to the scene of the crime. I mean, he's looking for a great central square, or maybe a square here with ideas of doing some damage down there. But white's just going through with his plan. Here comes the knight, and it's a blunder. So something black was planning for a while, he just coughed up a piece. So white's queen a1. It looks like maybe it's a bad move because you're putting the queen in the corner. Yet at the same time, the queen is covering a d4, stopping the knight from going there. Maybe black is expecting white to do this, or do this and this. So needless to say, he drops a piece. Now, I've covered this topic before. It bears repeating. What do you do when you're at material? Now, I'm not talking pawns. We're looking for a material imbalance involving pieces. You could be up a piece for 2 pawns. You could be up a piece. You could be up the exchange. You could be up a rook. Well, we know if we reach an endgame, if white can find a way to trade queens and rooks, he wins the endgame with ease. The drawback with that is black is usually not going to let you do that. Okay, and so you try to make exchanges, you can just make your position worse. And I've seen a couple of examples in all these league games I've covered on video. You just run out of ideas. So the opponent's going to avoid the trade, and you just kind of make yourself worse. So your objective is to go for a checkmate, because if you have an extra piece, let's play for mate. If you get the mate, the game's over. Now, if your opponent defends the mate, he may actually have to cough up more material. Maybe a pawn, maybe an exchange, maybe 2 pawns. Okay, and all that does, it means that number one, you can keep trying for a mate, and number two, if you can't find the mate, if you can trade down to the ending you want, it's a much easier win. So let's see how the sides approach this. Okay, so here we have to watch out. There's a rook in danger, and he protects it. Now, looks like black is trying to open up some lines, get anything going. And here black coughs up a rook, or the exchange, I should say. So it's not looking too good for black now. So white should continue to try for mate. And this opens up lines. That's one way to try for mate. Now we've got an open file. We can double up on it. We can check and double up on it. We could check and put the queen behind the rook. That's what he does. He puts the queen in front of the rook. Okay, so this offers a queen trade. And if black takes, white's chances for a mate are way down. But You know, I would lose to any of you watching this. If I had black, I'm losing to all of you. Okay? You know, it's going to take a miracle for black to win this. So, let's see. What did he trade the queens? No, he pushed here. But now we can go back for our mate. We have a queen check for what it's worth.
Check.
And we have another queen check. Or we have this. Okay, so here he's playing for queen trade. And, you know, one path, let me show you this. You know, instead of just trying for the queen trade directly, let's try to force that queen trade.
Check.
Now, if you check here, what's black going to do? We don't know. But if he plays here, it sure looks to me like black has to trade queens. Because if he doesn't, this is going to be curtains. Now, black could, black could play rook here, but now he stepped into a pin. Now, white to play could push this pawn, and now white has a threat, pushing again, pinning and winning that rook. So black would have to play this to stop it. And once we take, you know, we're getting closer and closer to that checkmate. Like he can't come in the corner because either rook slides over and it's mate. If he comes back this way, you know, we'll just double up the rooks, and you know this is a serious mate threat. So here, what you know, like I'm demonstrating, if you have the material, go for the mate. It'll end the game. You know, there's a famous story. There's a Australian chess master, Cecil J.S. Purdy. He was first world's correspondence chess champion. He won that back in the 50s, maybe in the early 60s. I don't remember. And he had his own magazine publication, Chess World. I used to have the first 20 years of it, and I sold it off to a collector. But he was playing in some kind of a match, his club versus another club or something, and they were at the tournament, and Purdy achieved a winning position after a lot of maneuvering. And he went up to one of his opponents. He said, "Well, I've built up a winning position, but it's going to take a long time." And as it turns out, those were the last words he spoke. He sat back down at the board, and he felt ill, and he collapsed, and they rushed him to the hospital, and he never recovered. So he never won the game. Now, I don't know what they did with the game. Now, technically, his opponent could claim a win on time. I don't know what they did. It could be they just annulled the game, but whatever. But you see, again, I want to relate that story because if you get the mate, you know, you get the win. Okay, you get the win quicker. So you have power. Let's use it. Now, naturally, what it wins, but we want to get you in the habit of winning the best way.
Check.
Now he found the queen trade. And, you know, like I say, I lose to every one of you here. And the rest is just technique. All white has to make sure is he doesn't accidentally have a hiccup and give up a back rank mate. But he's just happily collecting pawns, and there's nothing black can do. And if white wants to win that pawn, he certainly can. And he does. Goodbye. And at this point, black resigned. Okay. Let's stop the recording.